actually February, end of March. Student show has closed down before the end of the show. So everything started to kind of, winning weird. And then, the new season, which is the spring in Japan, we couldn't really start anything. Like a lot of people, forced to lock in, and school didn't start. And the government started to give us, like, we have to stay at home. And by the time we kind of knew, the news from Europe, news from the US was so serious. The numbers we kind of know from news, particularly from the US, I was kind of shocked to death because I still receive official letter from US embassy, Japanese embassy in the US, because I'm listed there. And the numbers increasing every day in New York is incomparable to what was happening in Tokyo. But Tokyo was basically, not serious about it at the time. That we knew about it, but we are talking about more about like things are bad in the US, things are bad in Europe, things are bad in China. But we couldn't really talk much about what was going to happen in the next year, what was going to happen in next season. We didn't know such a continuation because we're expecting to have Olympics. I'm not really supportive about Olympics, but it was a cancel, right? Around the time, I think people started to talk about something must really happen in the future.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Yeah, so Tokyo was kind of closed down. School was closed down first, I think, So
yes, school closed down. Never, closed down, never opened in spring.
Yeah, but all the sort of lockdown, there was no actual lockdown?
There is no lockdown. It's more kind of mellow lockdown. It was not, it's like a Japanese wishy-washy way always.
Yeah.
The government asks you to stay home. They encourage you to stay home. They kind of warn you to stay home, right? But it was no any lockdown or like you can't or like you shouldn't or like, you better not to go. That's what it is.
Okay, well, thank you. So, Hanako-san, if you could just tell us where you're based and how the corona crisis manifested in your area.
Yeah, so I'm based in Paris. So I just so the lockdown just started like middle of March, 17th of March, but it was quite suddenly. And yeah, like Kasahara-san was saying, there was a already coronavirus in January in Japan with a huge ship thing, princess.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, with something princess thing, and so I was reading Japanese news, so I felt that someday it will come to France. So I was preparing myself mentally that it might come, and so so even before the lockdown, I was trying to look for masks, but you can't find it in anywhere. In pharmacies, they don't sell masks in France. You should have a prescription from a doctor to buy it. So so it's just impossible. So I was starting to saw it by myself, and and so one day I walked out with a mask, and everybody, literally everybody, was looking at me very weirdly because they don't have they don't have the habit to see that, But two is that there's this very weird law in France that you don't have the right to cover your face because of the Muslim stuff. Yeah. So so if you cover your face, it's like, hey, are you sick, or maybe are you you know already you're a carrier of the virus, so you cover yourself. Or so it was yeah, it was very weird at first, but and also at that period, which is the middle of March, even the French authorities were saying that that mask doesn't help. So please don't put masks. And those ones are for health workers and for doctors and caretakers. So so the usual citizens shouldn't wear masks. But which is totally different today, you know. So the situation gradually changed, like maybe during end of April or something like that, when the death rates were really exploding, and also all the restrictions that the government impose is each time very how can I say strict and with punishment. Oh, hi.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. Yeah. So it's quite different reaction to the similar situation, isn't it?
Yes. Each time there is you have to pay a fee. Like it costs you like 135 euros if you don't respect the rule, and if you don't respect the lockdown, if you don't respect, yeah, all. So each time, even during the lockdown, to go just to go out, you need to print out a document to declare where you're going and where you're from and how long are you going to stay outside. And yeah, just very strict.
It's very strict.
Mm.
Yeah. So what about in UK, Nathalie, Boobis, if you could, yeah, sort of give us a little bit of framework.
Yeah, I think the UK response was similar timing to France, actually. The official lockdown started quite late compared to how when the virus was definitely started raging here and people were aware of it. So I think it was the third week of March. We went into official lockdown, but certainly in London from the end of February, people were panic buying hand sanitizer on the tube and on the public transport, and you were limited how many you could buy from chemists. Also no masks. At that stage it was just unheard of, you couldn't buy a mask. And then we were in official lockdown for 7 weeks, like the strictest lockdown, but unlike I think a lot of mainland Europe and in France, as you were just saying, Hanako, the UK government is not so hot on the kind of authoritarian enforcement. So it was like lockdown, but no fines and no actual enforcement. So you were just kind of expected to obey. And they were like, you know, there was all the slogans about stay safe, stay home. And schools also mid-March closed, and all non-essential hospital and medical stuff was cancelled. Everything, all public venues were closed from that point. And then I think around July or June, I mean, time's gone funny, I think, for everybody. Things started softly opening again. Some of the schools went back in June, a few weeks before the end of the summer term, before the holidays. and then things started opening, and the government were really trying to push people to go back to work and introduced a scheme called Eat Out to Help Out, to get you to 50% off your restaurant bills, to get people out and about. And there's been a big push over the summer to get people like going to the office again and get the economy moving. But I think the general mood has been quite tentative. I personally am not really back to normal. It doesn't feel safe. And actually, the schools went back last week and the week before for the autumn term after the summer holidays, or after like a really long break for a lot of children. And then unsurprisingly, in many, to some respect, the infections are starting to rise again. So actually on Monday, the government are introducing another limit, like no gatherings of over 6 people. But still go to the pub and, you know, spend money and go to restaurants. So it's quite mixed messages, but it's kind of, life has definitely not resumed again, and universities are all doing online teaching this semester, and lots of theatres are still closed. So it's kind of in a strange interim period at the moment, I think, like a lot of the world.
Yeah, thank you. Right, so we'd like to hear from German situation, but we need to share the screen to bring Chiara's account. Yeah, Alison, would you mind doing that?
Yeah, hold on 2 seconds.
Now established, you know, there's a sort of slight difference in terms of kind of regulations and things, you know, but basically it's sort of affected all of us. And now I'd like to bring the question a little bit more closer to individual cases, and, you know, so how those kind of situation actually affected, you know, our practice as an artist and also art organization, you know, organizers. And so, you know, and also particularly want to find out if you received any form of support from the government or from any organization, and what sort of support that you might have received or you didn't receive. So starting off with Emiko-san in Japan. So if you could just, yeah, give us some kind of your sort of actual experience, you know, how those situations affected.
Yes, well, including Kaori-san and Hanako-san, there's a lot of individual Japanese artists actually collaborated, sort of get together, and we started to do these activities, Art for All. This is just, it's not kind of systematic way of gathering or anything, but we thought, you know, we should raise the voice, because in Japan there's a certain amount of culture budget, but it doesn't really have effective way of using, in my opinion, and also it doesn't have much face. So artists doesn't know the governments really care about culture, or the government actually doesn't have a face to really do in a proper way. So we always hoping that maybe, you know, this occasion, although this is very socially destructive and difficult, this is a kind of nice way the artists gather to raise the voice together. So we organized the gathering via Zoom and, you know, Facebook messengers. And what we did was we made a statement and say that we need a support to offshore to the governments. And we gathered almost close to 5,000 of the people who agree with it. And we made it to a cultural agency and some other agencies in Japan, ministry to Japan. So government actually released, not because of our pleasure, but released a certain kind of support system during the this pandemic time. However, it is not functioning very well, in my opinion. There is a certain kind of budget, but it doesn't really reach the people who really needs to use. For example, in my opinion, the people who really willing to do something in art, who is trying to be artists, like maybe early 20s, or like, you know, like freshmen in college, or like a graduate students who is really serious, started to take it seriously to become like independent artists in 10 years, a decade or 2 decades. Those are the ones who really need the support, in my opinion. And I really want them to feel like they're supported by the people, supported by the government. So I really encourage them to apply for it. However, the system the Japanese culture ministry has is something very hierarchy, or like something not really kind, in my opinion. The way they're trying to give the money, but somehow the manner is not very kind. So we are trying to deliver the support from somebody who wants to support to somebody who needs support. And you know, there's a very bad communication in between them. So we're trying to make a certain kind of organization which help both sides. Either it's working very well or not, but this is something what we are trying to do now.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So now, Hanako-san, what's the your experience and also people around you in Paris? Hello? Yeah.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, I imagine it should be the case of being an artist, but when you have your activity as an artist, it's very solitary. You work a lot by yourself, and in your studio, and not so well. So in that sense, the lockdown haven't changed so much my my reality, but at the same time, since my studio is not in my home, but it's like 20 minutes walk away, and during lockdown you were allowed to go out within 1 kilometer, and it was a little bit out. So so I choose not to go to my studio. Well, I knew that if I really wanted to go, I might, but I wasn't feeling so safe to go in the areas that are my studio, or yeah, I didn't really wanted to take too much risk. So so one day I took every materials that I needed, and took back to my house, and built a new studio. And yeah, so that was my lockdown life. And I don't know much about other artists, but with some of them we kept contact, and yeah, we continued our activity, even though at the same time there are things things being postponed or things being cancelled, but in a way you get more time to concentrate on your work.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, but your events and exhibitions, were they cancelled or postponed?
Actually, I had one exhibition which was supposed to start in March, but it was postponed, and it started yesterday. so it's in a town called Rouen. It's in Normandy. So that's why now I'm in Rouen.
And it's open to public physically.
Yes, it's physically open to public, and And it's true that it has been a really long time. It's the first time since a long time that I assisted a real opening,
Yes.
like with drinks and people, and
Yeah.
that felt nice.
Yeah.
And but what was crazy was like you were not really supposed to take off your mask while it was a dinner buffet, but you can take your buffet and but you have to wear your mask while you take buffet. But you only take away your mask when you sit down, and so many little rules. But anyway, we were like like yeah, very happy to have a real one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, Nathalie, in UK, yeah, I actually benefited from Nathalie's, really amazing effort that Deptford X has made, and as one of the artists who actually has a studio in Deptford X complex. And but if you could just explain, your position, it's little bit different because you're working as an artist and also organizer, and it's kind of in between supported and supporting, so if you could just explain your position.
Yeah, so I'm not an artist actually. So Deptford X is a community arts organisation. Deptford is a neighbourhood of southeast London, and what we normally do is run a annual festival, which was set to be in October this year, but we also have an event space which we hire out to communities and local artists, and we have 9 studios, of which Kaori has 1. So we actually decided to close the offices and the event space to the public like a week before the official lockdown started. It was starting to get a bit uncomfortable, and I don't live in the area actually, so I was having to take public transport in and wasn't very comfortable. And I called an emergency meeting and decided that we should cancel the festival because who knows where we were going to be in October. And that was confirmed by very quickly the Arts Council, which is the UK funding body for arts, decided to pull all of its normal funding. And the way our funding model works is that we apply for a grant every year that funds the festival and a large proportion of our running costs. And we hadn't applied for the grant yet. It was just about to apply for it, and then this all happened. So that couldn't happen, and without the money there was no festival. And then the idea of organising a festival in autumn when the weather's not good without knowing what we were going was too much. So cancelled the festival as a kind of first step. And then I spent the first month of lockdown basically writing a lot of funding bids and grants and trying to figure out what we could do to keep supporting artists and also keep the organisation afloat, because without our event space hire and without the project grant, we were looking like, I mean, that's 75-80% of our annual income. The rest comes from studios. So the Arts Council opened an emergency funding programme, and I was lucky enough to applied for £23,000 from them, which was £10,000 to run an online public programme to support artists through virtual residencies and through kind of support mentoring sessions, amongst other things, and also some money to keep our running costs going. And then what Kaori's talking about is there was another fund by the Creative Land Trust and the Mayor's Fund, which was specific to London and is about enabling our creative access to buildings, public buildings, and supporting studios. And so and the Arts Council bid, I'd managed to get some money to subsidise studio rent reductions. So I think I had 3 months of subsidies and was able to offer, I think, like a kind of gradual rent reduction. I think I can't remember if it started in April or May, but like a 25% rent reduction, then a 50%, then a 75%, kind of aware that loads of artists were losing income from shows and commissions, but also a lot of artists work in the service industry and shop jobs and stuff to support their practice, and they were going. And then the Creative Land Trust Fund enabled me to raise another £10,000 to extend the rent reductions to the end of the year, to keep our studio artists, which supported the artists, but also meant that we were getting the funds to keep ourselves running. And then there was another fund from lots of different private trusts and foundations in London had kind of come together under the umbrella of something called the London Community Foundation, and they were open for grants. And so I managed to get another £5,000 from them to deliver more programming online. So it's been lots of funding bid writing. I had to have one colleague who took up the government furlough scheme, where you could retire someone from their job and still get 80% of their salary. I think it operated in a few countries. So she was away for 5 weeks. So I had a very lonely 5 weeks at home writing funding bids, and then I've continued to try and support artists through giving them funding for mini commissions, mini residencies, mentoring, free mentoring, and support people to deliver those, studio rent reductions. But it's, and essentially a mediator between the kind of funding body and the artists in our communities. But it's definitely not enough. We had an open call for 12 paid opportunities, and I had like 220 applications. So we're doing our best, but it's been really difficult.
Yeah, thank you. We have actually also recording from Germany, how that situation actually panned out. And so shall we, listen? Yeah, if Ali-san, so that's coming in,
So briefly about my experience of the lockdown, I have to introduce with the fact that I was traveling back to Berlin from Florida at the very end of February and got pretty sick right away. No wonder, as I came from hot summer, it was nowhere winter.
Did you hear the beginning of that, or do you want me to take it back?
Yeah, no, that's fine, it's good, yeah.
Fine.
5th of March, I got tested for COVID-19 by my general practitioner. The morning after, I had the results. It was negative. It was also pretty fast, actually, because, actually later things would slow down in Germany too, due to the increasing demand for tests. Anyway, I had high fever and more complications for some time, and this really affected me enormously in the way I perceived the danger of the virus and my behavior. I very rarely get sick, and I was getting better when the German lockdown started. For this, I took very seriously, limiting the shopping to the bare minimum. I was only going out to work once or twice a week as a freelance in a photo department. I couldn't do the job from home, so I was crossing a phantom city on my way away. At home, I had started to dive into my own photo archive and document a more private world. At the beginning of April, when Berlin allowed the practice of individual sports and walks in parks, I was having regular calls with friends in Italy. And to be honest, I felt bad as they hadn't seen the light for a while, and I had instead started jogging daily. I still had to go to the bigger park, the farther one. Otherwise, I would have bumped into many other joggers too closely. But yeah, it was being lucky on my view. Also, my parents locked down in the Italian Emilia-Romagna region from the 9th of March to the 18th of May. Had to fill forms and take them signed with them every time they would go to queue at the supermarket, and there were very often controls from the police taking place. So as such, the German lockdown was a very mild one, more focused on the responsibility of the individuals to behave accordingly than on total bans. Also, it was quite short and resolved into some kind of new normal pretty quickly. But yeah, the effect on the economy was pretty much the same as everywhere, pretty disastrous. on my side, I had a cancellation of a big photography job one day before it was due. It was the 1st of March. 2 exhibitions for spring were put on hold. For one, there was an attempt to transfer it on a digital platform. It didn't work out. Later on, other photo commissions were temporarily suspended or cancelled at all. No need to say I was really worried. So it was on that last weekend of March when Lockerungen, the smoothing of the rules, was taking place, that I was applying for the Soforthilfe 2, which is the Help Now program of the Berlin state. And honestly, it was easy. The system was put in place fast by the Berlin Investment Bank, the IBB, and although the information around it was a bit unclear, many breaches of data, technical problems during the application time, the form to fill in was very basic, just name, text and ID number, bank account, and your artist and or a professional website. My turn was on Saturday evening, and on Tuesday the money was on my account.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's good to hear that some system that seems to be working and accessible. Yeah. So the time is actually marching on, and we will have time to have more discussion afterwards. But I think I'd like to kind of open the discussion to the audience, and I don't know. Have you heard anyone actually asking any questions, Alison?
No questions yet, but does anyone have anything they'd like to ask? You can also just put up your hand.
If you could maybe use a chat function to put your hands up and to ask questions. But maybe I'm actually putting everybody on the spot at the moment. But so shall we just sort of discuss among ourselves? So we have seen different responses, from different country, and also individually we have a different experiences, and some people have had quite productive time in the studios, and then exhibitions opening up, but some people actually still affected by the cancelled exhibitions, and also the things actually changing since the whole situation is still ongoing. So the things has been would have been happening this year, it isn't happening, that kind of things. So Emiko-san.
Yeah. In my case, I am in the middle of kind of long lamp project, which requires me to go abroad quite often. So I visit a certain kind of location, and I'm interested in visiting like a railway, which kind of built for, invading other culture, or like, I use railway, and I visit the locations, and I smash coins in each location. So I have been doing in China railway, particularly in the north, where Japanese, during the time of the war, constructed a fake country called Manchuria, and they take the territory of the railway at the time. So I use this railway, and I smash coins down there, and Siberia Railway in Russia, and in America, there's a transcontinental railway, which worked very much to destroy the Native American culture in the US. So I'm trying to pick up the location and visit there to do the kind of action-based field work. And this has been taking for like 3-4 years by now. And I was thinking to visit the rest of the Europe last spring, and then also South Africa this summer. But of course, I needed to postpone it. So my project is very much based on the field work these days. And I have to really think about it, because I won't be able to do it So I'm still kind of wondering. Of course, I can do the studio work, but I was not particularly interested in when the pandemic happened. So I'm still kind of trying to position myself to somewhere, the soft landing
Yeah,
myself.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. So Hanako-san.
About the situation of the exhibition.
Yeah, well, sort of, yeah, your experience.
Yeah, so there was that exhibition postponed, which was in a public museum in France called FRAC, and then I was supposed to go on a residency in south of France, but that one is more like cancelled.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's what they say. Maybe maybe someday, but cancelled. And what was that after? I don't know. There's art fair.
Yes.
Art fair. Art Basel going online.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
everything went on online. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This was weird. But
yes. Yeah.
yeah. And
has
and
it
after
affected?
that,
Yeah. Has it affected the sales of your work?
actually, apparently it wasn't working immediately, which means it didn't really sell during the art fair, but it sold after.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
But since it's just JPEG that you see online, apparently maybe it's more easy for the artists and artworks that everybody already have seen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And after that, I had a new project, which is an online exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
And but this one it will be launched in 10 days or something. So I'm just now preparing. It's with the Japan Society in New York, and they are still I don't know if they're still locked down. They're still locked down, right? And so the exhibition place is they closed the exhibition, and they're not being able to reopen the show.
So you don't know what's going to happen to that show?
No. CC, I know because they closed the exhibition space, but they decided to do their whole program online.
Okay. Yeah.
So the projects that I'm working on with them is about an online exhibition.
Yes. Yeah.
So everything is online. You're going to have
changing.
Yeah. You're going to have an opening, but it's going to happen online.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a talk show. It's going to happen online, and yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like this as well.
Yeah, like this.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm actually aware of the time, so what we're going to do is to, sorry?
We have a good question in the chat.
Yes.
Did you want to go to that one?
Yeah. Yeah. So shall we sort of finish this at the moment and then open to that question after this? Is that okay? So we're going to finish the recording, yeah, and then we're going to continue if it's okay with you. I'm suggesting is that if everybody can join the conversation, basically we open the discussion to the floor, yeah, and And thank you, Nathaniel, to actually voice that through the chat function. But if you want to add anything, to or respond to what Nathalie just said, you're more than welcome to.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much, Nathalie, for that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So, yeah. It just blesses my heart, actually, just even to hear those words that people are thinking about different ways of financing. Like, I just think of the music world, for example, where they have been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed to the point where touring and merch was their only viable option for surviving in terms of their finance. And now that's gone. It just breaks my heart. It's devastating. And I think there's got to be some reconciling with the kind of funneling of arts towards entertainment value only, or like product value. Yeah, and so it's very encouraging. I think I love that you touched on the element of community being an aspect of kind of new forms of financing. I think, yeah, would love to just like expand on that and kind of saying, my other question asked a kind of similar thing, this idea that physical community is becoming visibly more valued. I think we're all fed up with Zoom calls, but I'm loving this one. Don't get me wrong. But something that's been on my mind is artists or art organizations partnering with groups that have a more sustainable and understandable financial model, and that being done in community. So, for example, me and my wife are working on an art production house model that serves artists, makes the production of art free for artists, because we aim to partner with local businesses that can make money more sustainably. So partner with a local company that can rent our space. So does that make sense? So we basically, our target market is the artist, but they're not the people paying. Our financial partnerships are elsewhere. And I think those kind of communities actually are giving artists a better understanding of their responsibility. So it's a financial plus, but also it's a character development for an artist. Actually, you can't do this on your own, and you're never supposed to. Like, be loved by people and enable them as well in adding to what I'd love to offer businesses. For example, when they rent our space, we can say, you needed to rent that space anyway. That was just a business need. That was an asset that you needed to run your business, this office. But your quadruple bottom line is huge. In you are, just by existing as a business, you might be, I don't know, an accountancy firm or whatever, you are enabling the cultural production of this country. I think that resonates quite a lot with businesses nowadays, that kind of social conscience attached to their expenditure. But yeah, that was just my kind of thinking around it. Thanks so much, Nathalie. I'd love to chat more about that, about how we can make this possible for artists. Got a real heart for that too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's definitely a sort of possibility in a way to stop and think about all of that art practice, that, what it is that we do as an artist and also art organization. What, in a way, almost sort of like questioning of the definition of art. It's kind of pushed upon us because of the current situation, which I think is actually really good. It's difficult, but also at the same time, it's a very important point to explore, I think. And so I'm just kind of wondering, I see a couple of faces here, and so even if you're not the invited contributor, if you want to add to what we've just talked about, or your experience, you're more than welcome to come on board. Shall I invite someone? Yeah. Yeah. Can I ask maybe Richard? Yeah, if you could unmute.
You can ask me.
Yeah.
What are you going to ask me?
Yeah, so I'm just kind of asking about this. You know, you're based in France. You know, so
Yes, I'm also based in Paris. Yeah.
And but you obviously have different experience from Hanako-san, and
I just moved to the garden because they kicked me out of the kitchen of the hotel.
It's a beautiful garden.
It's a nice garden. Yeah.
Oh.
My experience isn't so different from Hanako actually. My life didn't change a great deal because of the confinement, because I'm working, my studio is in the same building that I live in, so in that way I wasn't really dramatically affected. I couldn't go and buy materials I needed because where I get that's too far away, and as we heard before, we were only allowed to be out for an hour or within a radius of 1 kilometer from where we live. So I had to get a little bit creative in terms of what I could do with what I had. But that's okay. That's just an interesting kind of challenge, and I ended up making a lot of work on paper. But what you just said about being forced to really reassess what we're doing or why we're doing it or how we do it, I think that's what it's come to for me. And I can't really talk about it because I haven't come to any conclusions yet. But I do know I'm in the middle of a sort of a real rethink of my art practice, and I think it's going to take on a different form. It's going to shift. I don't know how. I mean, it's kind of, to me, somehow the idea of making an object and putting it in a room and getting everyone to come and look at it is a little bit old-fashioned and a little bit doesn't really work so well these days. So, and that's generally what I do. So, thinking about it differently. Yeah, that's all I can say, really.
Okay. Oh, I can see Chiara coming on. Yeah. In the video, so we can actually speak to real time, Chiara.
Yes, I hope it works. Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
So I don't know how much you were able to follow, but
I did actually listen. It was enough the network for that, and I found it very interesting, the point that as a photographer, me too, I really have a practice outside in the real world, and the traveling, the contacting people. Like, I tend to have encounters and spend time with people I just met and photograph them, and I haven't done that yet after the start of the pandemic. I really don't know how this is going to change, how this is going to work. I am sure it's going to affect a lot also the way people perceive foreigners, strangers coming, approaching. So this is really, giving me thoughts. Like, I don't know how it's going to change, how it's going to work.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you mind if I jump in on these thoughts, like the two kind of
yes, please,
artists kind of? Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. Really, it's amazing. Of course, there's some restrictions that are very strict in some countries that so far as to go, you're still not allowed out, you're not allowed to be in the same buildings as other people and stuff. But I guess one thing I'd like to pose is this idea that we shouldn't consider the way forward as a virtual one, but a restructuring of our physical workspaces. So maybe we just need to try harder to do our physical environment. My concern is that, what was going to happen over 50 years, which was a kind of a vast integration of tech into our lives, has now just been ushered in the space of 6 months. And we're not we're not kind of pushing back enough to kind of say, no, the physical is still inherently vital to art. And art, I feel like you guys as artists, you've got such an amazing voice to kind of say, no, like, we value like the physicality, you know, like sculpture and form and galleries and just the texture of oil on a canvas. Like, these all speak to something deeply human that we miss. You know, people, you know, these nations are talking about mental health issues increasing because of this isolation. So my encouragement to you would be, you can, as an artist who's been used to working on a project without knowing any financial up is coming your way, you've got something to draw alongside those people who have now joined you. The rest of the globe has now joined all artists in having to work, not knowing if money's going to come in, and you've got an inherent physicality and a touch with the kind of esoteric that I think is really, really needed. Yeah, my encouragement to you would be like, keep doing what you're doing as much as you can. Because the people around you are crying out for something physical, or crying out for something real.
Yeah,
I guess my question would be, like, how do we do that? How do we keep the physicality, like, amidst coronavirus?
Yeah, anyone? Yeah.
Maybe. I'm an artist and an art teacher, and I also do some work in an art gallery. And all of those spaces have been closed for such a long time. So what we've had to do is take the work out to the people. So in the school that I work in, I made up these little project boxes and took them to the children's homes. And I had to stand in their garden and talk to them from a great distance. But actually, they were very personalised things. And the children really appreciated having some art materials and this sort of contact. And it was just a very different experience than being in a classroom. So I found I was able to develop new projects, and as an artist I found that a really interesting experience. And also in the art gallery, because that's been shut and may not open again because of the venue's a difficult space. So we've been taking art out into the community again. So we did last Saturday, I did some work in a safari park, an art project there, some collaborative stuff with a scientist. And I know it's been difficult and the funding is atrocious and the lack of performance and stuff, but from my personal experience, I've been able to do some new things. And I think that artists will always survive, and they'll always respond to situations. And, you know, in a year's time, we'll see some fantastic art that will come out of this, probably.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so delivered of artwork, it sounds quite exciting, you know, concept, isn't it? The art, so instead of an audience coming to the galleries and museums, art actually going to the people. That's an interesting idea.
Can I respond?
Emiko, yeah, sorry, yeah.
Can I respond?
Okay.
I think it's an interesting question from Nathalie, and but what I think personally is like to the question how to keep materiality is like it's the materiality was, for me, it was never lost. Like meeting you on Zoom or showing my work on as a JPEG on our website. It's not substituting the real experience. It's not a copy, but I think it's just different. Just a different experience. It's a just different way to experience that than of meeting others. Like and also with the artwork, it's showing my work online. It doesn't substitute the real experience. showing, seeing something on the web is also an experience. So it's just that the texture is different, the material is different, the support is different, but it's not a copy. It's the JPEG is not the copy, but it should be in itself a support of of an experience.
Yeah.
So I think
the danger
that
if it's not a replacement or a copy, then it needs to not replace it, right? It needs to come together.
And I think you're right that it could, in a way, change our way of perception, the perception of others, the perception of the world, and so with this with all this lockdown period, I think many artists started to make things online and making like digital work and things like that, and also revisit the digital artworks that were very on vogue in the maybe in the 80s or 90s, like net art things. But I think the net art things also can be devised in two ways, which is like the one is something which is just like a recording of an experience that you can have in a gallery, for example, or just a copy of the experience of the real life. But the second type is like the experience on the net is real. So that is a real artwork that you should access to the website to see the real artwork, and I think that is much more stronger, and I think we should when we think about how our works can be developed, I think there will be more potential in that second way, and it doesn't mean that we should recreate some gallery experience or museum experience, but consider like we have just another materiality which is digital. And
yeah, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, Emiko-san wanted to say something about this as well. Yeah, so if you could unmute, yeah, yourself. Yeah, can you unmute yourself? Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I did. I always forget. So when I talk about art and community or physicality and the stuff, of course, the experience I had with Zoom conversations or art in internet and stuff expand a certain kind of ability, and I really enjoyed that. But I'm kind of, and also I would say the situation here in Japan and situation of art in Europe is quite different in my opinion. And I am kind of aware of, after Corona pandemic, people are kind of returning to conservatism. Like, let's talk about physicality. We love to touch the materials. We love to dig into, like, clay, whatever. Like people, I feel like a backlash of, conservatism might happen. This is something I feel on my skin. So after the experience of meeting the people on the internet or doing a lecture on the Zoom conversations and providing such an experimental, way of thinking of art, I really would like to cultivate a certain way of thinking of community/art, a little bit like a kind of Shasta Gate-ish, way of thinking. In a way, the body of art or the process of making art is a little bit reducing, but more about, accessibility, or like how many can actually participate in this stuff. I kind of have to change my way of thinking toward my art production a little bit toward that direction. This is how I feel like here in Tokyo, because believe me, in Japan, the people would turn into more conservative way of thinking of art.
Yeah. Do you think that is also relating to this sort of social situation? So I'm just kind of aware that the difference between the both artists and also just general audience living in situations like in Japan.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
How the art is, how the art field of art is considered in a social standard, and also artists themselves actually pretty much think they actually think artists are sort of outsiders of the society. They are different from the laborers who, they're different from the workers who do different type of job. So we have a segregation from art and society, which is okay in a certain level, but somehow for me, this is just a classic old art model. Art is a special, art is a different, is not working any longer. This is kind of, very heterosexual, power game for me. And it's kind of, but I strongly feel that people gonna go rush back to this idea again after Corona pandemic, because some people, I can tell from the students, for example, people started to claim that I want to touch clay, I want to do this massive work, I want to do this and that. It's not about the contents, it's about like kind of how they feel comfort. It's like you are always going back to eating rice or white bread, things like that. So I have to be a little bit aware of it here.
Yeah, and also the reason I'm kind of asking that is kind of in relation to Art for All. The fact that I just need to explain that the Japanese government announced that support system basically is available, and Art for All is sort of also kind of announcing to the people who actually signed up for it, yeah, this, you can apply for it, but there's not many takers, so that was kind of quite contrasting situation to Nathalie's, experience of, the small, funding goes and then 200 people apply, so that's actually opposite, they're kind of, and I'm just kind of wondering whether that is also to do with the people's understanding of what artists do, or the kind of social support system itself being basically not really kind of implemented or sort of accepted as a part of the,
right. Because
culture.
I think a lot of artists doesn't think art is very visible and livable, roles of society. So they're quite passive about, giving or like, support it and stuff like that. So if you actually know that art is very essential and, like um, important elements to function democracies or society of with democracy, there's no way that you would kind of step back that, well, am I okay to be supported? You got to be supported, and then this is kind of lack of what it is here. So there's a kind of invisible obstacles in between government who wants to give the money to people who support culture and the people who want to take that money. But both sides has certain kind of invisible obstacles. And then we're trying to figure out what is this obstacle, contents, history, culture. This is a kind of layers and a very deep story.
Yeah.
For me, who lived in the States for more than 20 years, it's kind of difficult to figure out why you hesitate, why you are so mean to provide the money to artists. Both sides, I don't understand that much, but I try to figure out it's tangled and, you know, difficult problem.
Mm.
Yeah, because the system is so complicated for the application. You have to fill out forms like, I don't know how many pages.
Yes, indeed.
I forgot to explain about the French system of COVID support, but it was so much simple. Like if you are paying tax, you have a tax number on your website, and you just go on your individual page, and you just declare that you didn't own a penny that month, and it was done. It's like in 3 seconds, and the money arrives very fast. It's not much amount, but the
very important point is there is a budget not much different from French government. And it is a people who need support, not much different from French artists either. But the people who want to support somehow have to use such a mean tactics. And what makes them to do that? And I really don't understand it. We have to figure out it. You know, there must be a reason why they couldn't make it very simple.
Yeah.
You know?
They
so
want
Chiara wants to say something
and make people suffering.
Yeah. So we can hear Chiara wants to come in to talk.
Yeah, hi. Exactly. I'm not putting video so that it should better work this way. Yeah, that there was a part of recording that wasn't played. It's not a big deal. It's just that I ended explaining how the health in Germany it was easy, but in the end there was a point actually which for me it's quite important and fits in the discussion now, and it's about how the money is given, because you were saying there is money, but there has to be also an understanding on how the money is given and what the needs are of the people receiving them, because what became clear in Germany, in my opinion, is that the way we work, the way we live is not understandable or is not understood exactly by the administration, by the system. The possibilities to have subsidies were either compared to the unemployment benefits, which doesn't fit someone who doesn't work in a regular environment, or with a system of loans, or with a completely different ways. Like, it wasn't understanding what the real needs are, in my opinion, of artists. Like, there was money, there is money, it can be given, but it's really important how it's given.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that's to a certain extent, I mean, it's a different system altogether, but there is a kind of parallel there, although that numbers are just totally different between the German system and Japanese system. But that gap of understanding of what artists do and how we live is one of the main reason of that obstacle. Yeah, thank you, Chiara. Right. So we're sort of running into 1.5 hours now. So if you need to go somewhere, you're more than welcome to leave the Zoom room. But if you are also wanting to continue, I'm happy to be continuing the discussion.
I would have been so happy to continue, but I have to catch my train.
Yes, yeah.
I have to go back to Paris.
Okay, yes.
I want to recognize it's been accelerated, our use of Zoom. I don't think I would have been using Zoom without this pandemic. But I think there's a lot of positives like this, you know, like you may well have organized it in real life, but we wouldn't have had speakers from around the world sharing their experiences. And something I've been running with Deptford X is called a program called Support Network, which is mentoring online for early career artists of color. And certainly in the UK, the communities, which is a very multicultural country, communities outside of cities are often very white. And you know, we've had young black artists in rural parts of the UK or very small towns who've had no connection to anyone of their, you know, in their community who are also artists. I mean, there's very few artists, you know, in those communities, let alone people that look like them. And so something that's come about is that we've had people like that plug into these mentoring sessions that we're offering in London. And prior to the pandemic, we would have offered them in real life maybe, but we wouldn't have thought to have them online. So I think there's a lot to take away. And something I'm really interested in and is the idea of trans localism, and this idea that we can operate on a local level and we can do more open-ended, process-led projects that have a kind of more community use, but actually we have this amazing digital tool where we can transmit those conversations, share toolkits, share kind of like open source sharing of material and understanding, and connect with people who don't have the same privileges of geographical communities or very isolated. And actually the type of knowledge and communities we can share in that way, I think is quite exciting. And certainly in the work I do with Deptford X, that's something I will continue even when we go back to doing a local arts festival, to keep the conversations and difficult conversations that art can very specifically help to have, to keep them going on a kind of global scale, wider scale through digital technology is quite exciting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Can I ask something? So I work full-time in London, but I also run residencies in Japan. And we are having to switch to digital residency this year. And I remember Nathalie were mentioning about digital residencies. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we have 6 digital residencies. We've called them residencies at home. And basically they are month-long paid stints for artists to we're basically inviting artists to take the money and explore their practice and use it as time to research. So we're very explicitly telling people that it's not about producing an outcome. Essentially what we wanted to enable was for to give a fee to artists to have some space and time in whatever's going on in their life and in the world right now, to kind of keep their practice ticking over. And all we're asking of them is that they share some of their research in progress with us, and we're posting it online. So as little as reading lists or like watching lists, you know, what's inspiring your work, or sometimes people are having conversations with the people and recording them as interviews or taking pictures to inform their practice. But basically that, like, very open-ended research processes that we're funding and providing some kind of I'm doing Zoom talks to them to offer some kind of curatorial mentorship as well, so they feel a bit connected. But the idea for us as well is that these are conversations and these are research avenues that we can help for artists to start in their practice, and then hopefully we'll be able to pick them up with them when we go back to doing a festival in real life, and so continue supporting that particular journey they're on and hopefully manifest something IRL as well.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. Are they local artists, or how did you kind of choose these six artists? What kind of criteria did you have?
It was an open call. We were privileging local artists because we are a local festival. We wanted to be able to support people in our community. So the majority of them are, but we were also really privileging perspectives, personal identities that had found it difficult and had a kind of who marginalized identities. So we have a couple of artists who are disabled, or we have artists coming from a queer perspective, artists coming from the perspective of color, and so actually we're inviting them to explore what they would like, how they would from a marginal position want to see the future world, basically. So it's kind of, that's the kind of conversation running through it, but really it was really hard to choose, so I'm not gonna lie. But it was the kind of strength of the project, of the research ideas, based on how much people felt they had to say from a difficult position to start with.
I think the idea of this locality and being able to connect anywhere all over the world via internet, I think it's quite I think it's really interesting, because suddenly like if you want to have this kind of conversation, you can have it with anyone all over the world, whereas before you would have a set of audience. It could be geographical, kind of local people, or it could be like artists, or it could be in terms of subject. So I think it's for organizations, I think it's quite challenging how we approach in terms of like public engagement, and like who do you want to reach, and what kind of artists do you want to support. So I think it's a good time to think about these kind of things, like what your organization is really for. So it's quite challenging, and we're planning for online residencies, and we don't know if it's going to work out, but we're just going to do it and find out what we get.
What was your thought with how to deliver virtual residency?
So in Japan, if you talk about residencies, it's usually international residencies, because of the funding situation, because the government agencies, they have specific budget for funding for artists residencies, but because they're an international department, international department, so they would fund international artists. So automatically residencies mean international residencies. So obviously this is really difficult situation, because international traveling is just not possible. So we have to kind of convince them in terms of budget, which is like a challenge already. But having to, because they really want to see the outcome of the residency, which is totally different from what you're doing. So, but basically we're hosting a filmmaker, so we arrange a lot of interviews. We're based in Hokkaido, so we can arrange lots of interviews, and we give language support, obviously localized knowledge. So that's something we can offer at the moment, but we'll see what happens, because things change in the process. So yeah, we just try.
Playing it by ear a bit,
yeah.
I'll take this opportunity to say goodbye. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Yeah, so I'm just reading the chat where the funding to actually access funding for the artist wasn't easy. That's Nathalie, that right? Was it Nathalie? Yeah. And I have also, I can share my personal experience as well. I have actually applied for various, funding, but I didn't actually get it. And also the furlough scheme doesn't apply for me because I'm associate lecturer, so I'm only seasonal, teaching staff who doesn't have a basically security of payment. And so I haven't basically been employed since May, and then all the summer courses basically cancelled again, so I don't get any payment. But also I don't I can't apply for the self-employment scheme, which was also made available by the Rishi Sunak COVID scheme, because my previous year's income, more than 50% was from PAYE university pay, so that basically exclude me totally. Yeah, so so I'm quite sure there's lots of other artists who fell through the cracks of the systems, and in a way that's what, in a way, the Art for All, the group was trying to somehow highlight the to the in that particular case to the Japanese government, that somehow they sort of realized the importance of supporting artists, especially when it came to the likes of actors and the people on the gig culture, that obviously the physical gigs all gone, so therefore they were in immediate need for that financial support, so that was sort of kind of started to happen quite earlier on, but when it came to the fine art area, particularly visual art, fine art area, I think they basically haven't got a clue what people do. And also the variety of activities that artists engage and different model of financial support each artist actually kind of based on is so vastly different, so it's actually quite difficult to kind of bundle into one group, isn't it? That's the kind of major obstacle. Yeah.
But I would say this problem about visual art field, everybody's kind of segregated each other, and we don't really cultivate like big, in visual artist community. It's somehow one way or the other sharing with all other continents. I think it was a little bit like that in the US, and I'm sure it's a certain kind of tendency sharing in the Europe as well. And I think it's different from the music industries and also movie industries, theater industry, because they somehow have to get together to do one project more physically, and they have a history of unions and history of cultivating each other and stuff. So I think and then also in Japan, it's a little bit more harder because the history of contemporary art is very, very rare, kind of invisible in society. So there's a lot of artists and interesting art there, but there is no history that we get together and say something together. So this time I feel like we really have to raise the voice, and we have to kind of be visible that we did something. So either it succeed or not, taking the action is very important to let the people after us, like younger generation, to kind of show the passage and follow the passage, and then take more stronger action eventually. So we might not be able to change a lot of things, but I think what we are doing now, it's kind of important. But I feel like we still need sort of keystone to make a strong bridge, and a lot of fragments are missing. Yes, yeah. Don't you feeling that way, Homma-san?
Yeah.
What would those be? The fragments that are missing.
Say it again.
What would those fragments that are missing be?
Fragments are missing. Consciousness among artists. and understanding of the art in a society, and the lure provided by the ministry. And then also, we didn't have something like this happened in the past, so we haven't learned from the history yet. There's a certain kind of thing happened, but it didn't continue. It was interrupted.
And I think also the culture of basically there's no strong history of socialist sort of support as a kind of done thing. That's one of the things as well, isn't it? So there's a kind of stigma.
I think there might be, but they tend to be. I think there might be, but they just tend to be not in the.
I think it's yes and no, though, because after the World War II, Japan was one of the strongest, way of thinking socialism in a way that there's a lot of, young Marxist, students who did a very active student movements and stuff. But somehow when the economy grows so fast, like how it happened in China, like the last couple of decades, it was pretty much like the same in Japan. And drastic change from the poorest in the world to like richest in the world, kind of jumping over the steps kind of situation. So there's a lot of process might have happened in between if we took the time at the time, kind of got skipped. So all of a sudden we felt like we had freedom. All of a sudden everything is okay, we felt. All of a sudden, things are smoothed out. That's how, at least how people felt like. But when the crisis happened, like, Fukushima thing or tsunami time, or this time, the pandemic, corona pandemic, we kind of got to see that maybe it wasn't built that well. And it hasn't.
Yes. I think it also helps these kind of times shake up people's value systems. So I think dancing around the edges of these conversations is that idea, like we're not valuing cultural products for what it is.
Yes, exactly. Well, at least myself, I would like to learn. I would like to take this moment as such a, like a moment to learn something that I didn't. So, and the people here were so positive. So, but there's a lot of people, be aware. There's a lot of people who doesn't think in that way. So we have to be aware.
How can we do our best work in our friends, our family, our local communities? Like, how do we do our best work in gaining that awareness in people, the value of just cultural product? That's an open question, sorry.
I believe it's I believe it's the opportunity to experience creativity as part of your life, and that's a long-term project. But I think certainly in the UK, and from what I understand, and like a lot of the world's cultures, it's just not part of access to creativity from a young age is siloed. It's a separate part of society. It's not integral. And I don't think until like the process of creative production is democratized, I don't think we can get there. So I believe it's really got to start with people being able to create as something integral to their day-to-day existence, and not this kind of other bit, or this kind of like easy school class that's not really given any credence, but it's actually woven into things. But I honestly think until that, it's just going to be this remove. But
so at least what I
Sorry, I have to go now. So
thank you.
It's been very interesting. Thank you for organising it.
Very much.
Yes. Bye-bye.
I think what we have kind of managed to do so far is, there's no sort of conclusion, or there's no sort of cohesive, things actually can be drawn out from this conversation. But I think what we have established is that at least, this whole COVID situation has highlighted the problem which was there before, which always has been there, but somehow it actually has shed the light on those issues, and in different context, different historical contexts, different places in different countries. And I suppose how that is going to be then dealt with is another question, but I think that's a big question that we need to carry that with us and then kind of continue this conversation in future. But thank you so much for attending, and we want to share this conversation of the recording later on ArtAction UK, and then also with your permission, if you're not